sewing friends, welcome to my sewing room. My name's Beth, and if you're new, welcome. Today I'm adding applique to the border of my friendly sampler quilt. Let's get started. In the recent video I made about this friendly sampler quilt, I made some vines before a trip. We were going camping to the redwoods and I wanted to take the vines along with me to applique on the border. And here's the beautiful campsite that we were at, and I was able to sit and work on this vine. I oftentimes will put a vine on a border with an iron with pressing it, and you can see this quilt is not pressed. It's been folded up for this camping trip, but I think it worked out just fine. The first thing I did is I laid out my vines in sort of a curved line, and then I took this tan thread and I basted that vine onto the border. I did give a close-up shot of those big stitches that I was making, and after the big stitches were in, I took my green thread that matched the vine, and I was even able to do this on my lap as we traveled because it was basted. I was able to applique that vine onto the border there. While I was at the campsite, I had some paper that the kids had been drawing on in the trailer, and I cut out some shapes. I had some idea of some shapes I wanted for the applique, and as you can see, this paper is well loved and it's getting even a third life here for these applique pieces. I did not have a lot of supplies along with me on my trip, so I am using what I have, and I had the paper like I said, and I just drew around that shape. Here I'm trying to do it one-handed because I also don't have a tripod with me, and then I cut out the shape larger than the paper to give myself that seam allowance, and it's quite a bit larger right now. Like I said, I'm just using one hand. And when I got home, I was able to put those shapes on my border. So I did the blue thread with this blue sort of flower. I'm going to add to this flower in a little bit, and I just did a needle turn. This shape did not have to be perfect. It wasn't needing to be a perfect shape, so I just needle turned under the edge and stitched around the shape. But I'm going to show you in a minute that I changed my method just a little bit. It was a little bit easier now that I'm home. I'm able to access more items. I can use an iron, and I have a spray bottle and different things like that. So I'm going to applique this on and show you the next step. Here's one of my favorite ways to applique, and that is to take that paper shape that I make for my quilt. I lay these on the quilt to kind of see if I like them, and then I make that shape pattern with some cardboard using an old cereal box. So I'm going to draw around the shape, cut it out, and then I will be using starch and my iron to prepare the applique pieces for my quilt. this method, I'm using a white chalk pencil or just a white pencil so that I can see the lines. And after drawing around my shape, I'll cut closer to that line, not super close because I do want a seam allowance. And then at the center where there's that dip in this shape, I'm going to cut all the way to the line so that I can turn it under and I'll be able to get that deep valley in this shape here. Then I took this over to my ironing board with the cardboard. I first sprayed the fabric with starch, and then I took my iron and pressed those edges in all the way around. Once all the edges are pressed in, the shape is much easier to applique onto the quilt. It takes that step ahead to have the iron and the starch, or I've also used just water to press the edges, and it really does help prepare that little flower for appliquing it to the quilt. So I wanted to show you all the shapes that I'll be using for my quilt, different size leaves, a flower, and I guess there's 2 different flowers. You'll see in just a minute those little horseshoe shapes will have some circles in the center, so I'm hoping that they'll look like flowers. And then I just laid my paper pieces around the border to get an idea of what my quilt border might look like. My homemade applique designs and pieces are sort of a journey. I don't always know what I'm going to do next, but I had an idea that some circles would be very nice in those horseshoe shapes. So I'm using the leftover circles from one of my applique designs in this quilt top. They'll be just the same size, and I'm going to make some red berries or some red circles to go into those blue flowers. I cut these circles a little bit bigger than my cardboard pieces. I did a very big basting stitch, running stitch all the way around the outside, and then I put my cardboard into the center of my red circle and pulled tight. Sometimes I put a little knot or just a slip knot in it like I'm doing now, and sometimes I didn't. But all I needed to do after I got the basting stitch or the gathering stitch in there, I took all of these circles to my ironing board and I sprayed them with some starch, pressed, and then I needed to remove those cardboard circles before appliquing them to my quilt. I think it looks really pretty to have these red circles into those horseshoe shapes. It's just an unusual kind of flower, and I have that on two sides of my quilt, a large blue flower and a smaller blue flower, and then on the top and bottom of my quilt I'm going to have some red flowers. I mentioned earlier that making these applique designs on a quilt is kind of a journey for me. I enjoy making decisions as I go along, and I did cut out some pink leaves and decided after sleeping on it that I think I prefer to have all green leaves. I also am adding one more flower to that red side. I have the large red flower with 5 petals, and I thought it would look nice to have a smaller one. I also took those pink leaves that I didn't end up using, and I'm going to be adding some pink berries here and there along that border between the flowers. Here's my quilt before finishing the applique, and I really like the way that it's turning out. I like those little pink berries here and there, and I'm going to make some more, and here are the leaves that I am using. The pink leaves that I did not end up using in my quilt, they will become berries. This project has really kept me busy. Even this morning, I packed up a little box, and one activity I have every morning, and it's starting up again, is waiting for the school bus with my daughter. So I packed everything up in my box, a little work box, and I'm going to put berries together while we wait for the school bus. And before you knew it, I had all those berries ready for my pressing and applique. And here's my quilt top all ready to go with that beautiful applique. Just some fun, easy shapes that I think really add a lot to this friendly sampler. Thanks for joining me today, and I'll see you next time.